Get this.
Yay! Go ahead. Who is applauding out there?
Say that in the microphone.
Who's applauding out there? Thank you. We need more of that. Everybody be seated.
Be seated to win. We have to start the conference. Where are the?
You're good.
What are the names? A record-breaking $2,625 to give away over these next 3 days, plus a mini grand prize on Thursday, which is 2 nights stay here at the Hyatt, plus $300 cash, plus a grand prize on Friday of the Ritz Oconee and $400 cash. So you've got to be, everybody knows the rules, right? You've got to be present, you've got to be seated. And then any name that is drawn in these days, we will put back into the envelope for the grand prize. Okay? Mike, are you ready?
I'm ready. You see that Mary Ellen gets to do all the rule reading.
You pick. I read, you pick. Remember, we only did this in the spring. Wait till I say what it is. Okay, $50 from Wayne County Chamber of Commerce. John Riddle, thank you.
Everybody give John a hand. And somebody else that's really going to owe Wayne County a debt of gratitude, Phil Smelly, Fayette County Development Authority.
All right. Oh, here.
That was Phil, that was a little bit weak. We'll give you that $50. The next people really got to celebrate when we call your name, all right? Yours was a little weak. Okay.
All right, the next prize, the last prize just for this section is $75 cash, $50 from Tri-County EMC, Greg Mullis, thank you, and $25 from Live Oak Community Development, Artie Allen. Now, Live Oak has donated $125, but to make the math work, we had to split it. Artie Allen, thank you. Who's the winner, Mike?
Big round of applause for Greg and Artie. Everybody looks excited. But not as excited as Barbara Rivera Holmes, Albany Daugherty Economic Development Commission.
Excellent.
Yay!
I'll take that name.
Excited. There you go.
All right.
Next.
Good afternoon. Please stand with me as we go back to a GEDA tradition of Pledge of Allegiance while opening our 50th anniversary. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam President, the floor is yours.
Welcome. Are you excited to be in Savannah? We sure are glad you're here with us today for the 2013 GEDA conference to celebrate our 50th anniversary. And as we get started today, I want to share a quote with you that I refer to many times, and it's from Vince Lombardi. Now, Vince told us the difference between successful people and unsuccessful people is not the lack of strength, not the lack of knowledge, but rather the lack of will. I can promise you in Savannah this week, we will not be unsuccessful because all three of those qualities are so strong in the people in this room today. So I want to give you a hand and you give yourself a hand for all you're doing for the state of Georgia. I'm Joanne Lewis, and I'm chair of GEDA, and I'm the executive director for the Douglas Coffee County Development Authority. And again, we welcome you here. We want to remind you that none of this would be possible without our great partners, our sponsors. And all through the conference, you will see their names flashed on the screens, and you will also find them in the corridors leading into our meeting locations. So make sure you take the time and stop and tell them thank you. But even the sponsors and all of you here, there wouldn't be a conference without our conference committee chairman and his team. I want to ask Tim Evans to join me on stage. While he's coming, give him a big hand for putting this conference together. Now, Tim, everybody here is special, but I think you've got a list of some really special people.
Yeah, Joanne, the conference wouldn't be anything without each and every one of you. But we do have some special guests today. We really want to thank the leadership from Frank Ginn, Senator Frank Ginn, Chair of the Senate Economic Development Committee, and Representative Ron Stevens, Chair of the House Economic Development and Tourism Committee. And a few of the folks from their committees that have joined them, Senators Steve Gooch, Jeff Mullis, Donzella James, Mike Dugan, John Albers, Hardy Davis, Tyler Harper, and from the House joining Representative Ron Stevens, Paulette Braddock, Craig Gordon, Micah Gravely, Gerald Green, Michelle Henson, Susan Holmes, Pedro Marin, Casey Pruitt, Jimmy Pruitt, Barbara Sims, Tom Taylor, Al Williams, and Jay Roberts. Let's give them a hand. And thank you for your continued leadership and support of economic development.
Thank you, Tim. And moving right along with the program, we're going to hear about the state of our community, the state of our state and the economy. I can think of none better than my friend Chris Clark. I could read you a bio, I could tell you a lot about Chris, but raise your hand in the audience if you don't know Chris Clark. If there's a few of you out there, just see me afterwards and I'll tell you who he is, but I promise you, after you hear him speak, you'll know him and you'll appreciate all he does for the state of Georgia. My friend and your friend, Chris Clark, President of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce.
That was an introduction, so thank you, Joanne. I appreciate it. I couldn't, that was a joke. I appreciate the one laugh I had out there. It's going to be a long few minutes for y'all. I couldn't think of anywhere better to be than helping kick off this 50th anniversary of GEDA. This organization has meant so much to me personally in my career, and I know personally to so many of you here today. So I want to thank all of you for coming to this 50th anniversary. Now, Joanne and Tim and Mike asked me to talk a little bit about the state of business in Georgia, but our next speaker does a much better job of talking about the state of business, so I'm going to let him do that a little bit. I want to talk for a minute about GEDA. So we're celebrating 50 years, but this whole story started about 55 years ago when the president of the Georgia Chamber at the time invited 5 economic developers from the power companies and a couple of communities to lunch in downtown Atlanta. And he told him, he said, you know, I'm hearing we're kind of starting to see this manufacturing increase in Georgia. You guys are doing a good job going out there, try to recruit companies here. Y'all really ought to talk with each other. You ought to talk about the things that we need to be more successful in economic development and how we coordinate our team. And so over the next 5 years, they decided they were going to meet every day or every month at lunch and share notes. And so this little group grew from 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 and kept growing until in 1963 it spun off. And the predecessor of the organization that we're here today celebrating really started. Now, when I think about that time, 50 years ago, and there are a few people in the room that were around maybe in those first meetings. If you were in one of those first meetings, raise your hand. Okay, well, we moved past that generation. Oh, well. I was really hoping somebody would have been in one of those early meetings. I can make up anything now, and nobody will call me out on it. So you think about it for a minute. What if you went to those 5 folks sitting around that lunch table and said, all right, think about the next 50 years. What do you think Georgia's going to accomplish? What do you think Georgia's going to look like? What do you think as economic developers, which was a very new term back then, what do you think we're going to be? Well, I don't think they had any way of understanding what's happened in the last 50 years. And it's happened largely because of this partnership between business and government and this thing called economic development. You think about the industrial companies that have moved to Georgia in those 50 years that you guys helped recruit here. Everybody from Coors to Pirelli to Anheuser-Busch to Baxter, Caterpillar, Kia, Gulfstream, Aflac, and I could go on and on and on and name all the companies that are employing Georgians because somebody in GEDA partnered and helped recruit them to the state of Georgia. 50 years ago, I don't think that they could have foreseen a change in our economy from the agrarian economy that we have to this diversified state that we've got now. I don't think that they would have seen that Georgia would have been the home of the Olympics, the world's busiest airport, the fastest growing seaport. I don't think that they could have envisioned a business-friendly climate that we have now because of the great work of our General Assembly and our governor. I don't think they could have seen any of that. But you also have to realize when they're sitting there, they were a state of 4 million people with about 1 million workers. And today we stand here with 10 million people and 3 million workers. I think that's pretty hard to see. Now, the change that we've seen as a state and as economic developers, even in our profession, have changed greatly over these last 50 years. And now I could stand up here and I could talk to you about more of those successes, but those of you that know me know I kind of tend to like to look forward. And so I sent out an email and made a few phone calls to some of y'all in the room, and I said, think about the next 50 years of GEDA and economic development. Tell me the kind of things that you think are going to be important for us as developers that we need to know, things we need to work on. What do you think the profession is going to be like? And I want to share with you some of what I heard really from all of you and some thoughts that I have. But in order to look forward, we really have to kind of have a feel I think, of what the demographics are going to look like. And I do want to share with you, though, first a quote that Tim Martin sent me from Bill Gates. He talks about looking in the future, and Bill Gates said, people often overestimate what will happen in the next 2 years, but underestimate what will happen in the next 10. And Tim, I think if he continued that theme out and you said, well, what about the next 50? He'd say, we can't even fathom what that's going to look like. But Georgia, if we look at just the numbers, is going to change a whole lot in the next 50 years. If you look at our population now at 10 million, in about 15 years we'll be at 13 million. We could be at 18 or 19 million by 2016, which means if we grow to that number, we're going to need twice as many jobs than we have today that don't exist in Georgia, just to keep those folks employed. Think about those numbers for a minute. The good news about that statistic is it's called job security for economic developers. So this is a good profession. We're going to need to keep doing the job and the work that we do. While we're going to grow, we're also going to see a big change in our workforce. In the next 25 years, the number of senior citizens in Georgia is going to double. It'll grow to a point in about 40 years where we'll have more people getting Social Security than we have in K through 12 school system. And you think about what the impact that's going to mean on this state from a workforce standpoint. And we're also going to become a much more diversified state. If you look at the numbers, the majority of the state right now will become the minority in about 20 to 25 years. And the Hispanic community is going to be the fastest growing and one of the dominant sectors in this state. And it's a group that really we don't even talk to very much, especially when we look around the room here. And so we're going to be a much more diversified state. By 2060, we're going to have more people that move into Georgia than are born in Georgia for the first time. And you think about the impact that that's going to have on us. And then while all those changes are happening in Georgia, some folks brought out the point to me that the entire country and how we do economic development is going to change, because right now it's the U.S. versus China for the number one most dominant economy in the world. But in 50 years from now, we're going to be doing good to hold on to number 3 behind China and India, which is going to make our job even harder. But what we do, I think, even more important. Now, any of you that have been to any of our power lunches this summer for the Georgia Chamber, you've heard me talk about this book, and I'm kind of obsessed with it. It's called The Coming Jobs Wars. Anybody read it yet? I've been talking about it. Well, John on my staff has read it because I made the whole staff read it. Thank you, John, for doing that. If you haven't, gosh, all summer I've been telling y'all to read. If you haven't read this book yet, go read it. It ought to be the Bible of economic development. It's written by Jim Clifton, and Jim is the president of Gallup. And in this book, he talks about, for the first time in the history of the world, every economic sector, every demographic sector in all 150 countries, the number one issue is not religion, it's not where am I going to get my next meal. The number one issue is, how can I get a better paying job? Now, that's not strange to us because we think that way already. It's strange when South America makes it number one and Africa makes it number one and Europe makes it number one. It means that there's a growing global competitiveness out there that we haven't even fathomed yet. And what he goes on to say is that wars of the future are not going to be fought over borders. They're not going to be fought over religion. They'll be fought over jobs. And here's the kicker. And here's where it comes back to you guys. He says that the wars won't be won by federal governments. And I know that's not strange to think that the federal government would do anything right now with the environment that we're living in. But he says the folks that will actually win those wars are state legislatures. They're local cities and county elected officials. They're the local economic developers, the chambers, the business communities at the local level are going to be the biggest difference maker for whether communities get jobs and grow and succeed, or whether or not they don't get jobs and they fail and they wither and they die away. Guys, I tell my guys at the chamber, we wake up every day getting ready for that war. And the fact is, in Georgia, you guys are our army. You're the warriors in this whole new competitiveness battle that we're going to have all over the world. And so if we're going to do that battle, if we're going to have that battle and we're going to be successful, it means that we're going to have to take on some challenges. Now, the great thing about GEDA is we have a whole history of working together over the last 50 years to tackle different issues, to work together and find success. We're going to have to work together as economic developers to address our infrastructure problem in this state. I'm very proud, and I know Chairman of the Transportation Committee is proud of those 3 regions that passed their transportation referendum. I thought that y'all, I had a couple of thumbs up. I thought all those communities would applaud for themselves. You should. We've got to figure out what to do about the rest of those regions. We've got to figure out what to do about our airports, our harbor deepening out here that we need to get done. We've got to make sure we keep fighting these battles to make sure we've got the water that we need. Economic developers have a stake in all of those battles. We've also got to make sure, excuse me, that we don't leave behind as economic developers our rural communities. Because while our economy is doing better in Georgia, we still have pockets in this state that are trying to claw out of this economic downturn, and they really don't see a bright light at the end of the tunnel right now. And so we have to be about, I believe, as GEDA, raising the ship for the whole state of Georgia. We've also got to take a more active role in workforce development. GEDA was a key part, where's Jackie at, of helping create and grow and support the work of Quick Start. That's half the battle. We as an organization have not spent a lot of time lobbying and supporting the improved K through 12 in Georgia. But guys, the companies that you're getting now, y'all know as well as I do, they're making 50, 60-year investments. They know they got Quick Start, they know they got good universities, good technical colleges, but now they're asking about your kindergartners, and they're asking about your first graders. And if they don't like what they're hearing, they're moving to somewhere where they get the numbers and the investment that they think. I think this organization ought to play a bigger role in that. I also think that this organization, not me, I don't think, this is what I've heard from many of you, is that GEDA has done really good at raising a generation of industrial developers. We've also got to make sure that every community in Georgia and every economic developer has the skills they need to be successful with multiple strategies, whether that's attracting film and video or tourism, or small business development, all of those types of things. They've all got to be part of the big strategy of what we do, and that's a role that clearly GEDA can tackle and work on very uniquely. But the number one thing that I heard from all of you that I talked to, and it's the same thing that's echoed in Clifton's book, is that the difference maker in this battle really comes down to leadership. Do we have the right leadership in the right place to be successful? And I know as economic developers, we're chasing projects, we're doing lots of work all the time, but if we're not careful, we'll wake up and we'll have people at the local level or in other roles that don't support job growth, that don't support economic development. And these legislators can tell you, we battle them at the Capitol all year long. You think job creation is a good guy job, everybody's supportive of us, but there's a growing group out there that's not. and they want to stop us whenever they get that opportunity. So I think it's important that we keep re-electing Republicans and Democrats that are pro-business at the local level, at the state level, and that we're sending folks with good common sense up to Washington to try to take a little common sense up there. We need to re-elect people like Governor Nathan Deal, who makes job creation his #1 priority. We've got to be about this issue of leadership. And GEDA in particular, what I heard over and over again, has to continue to do what we've done for 50 years, and that's make sure that all of our local leaders have all the tools that they need to be successful. And you take those back to your development authority members, your cities, and your counties. Now, Dennis Chastain gave me a great quote. I want to share it with you. Dennis, when I asked him, I said, think about the future of the profession. And here's what Dennis said. He said, the economic developer of the future must be able to shape their community, their region, and their state. He said it comes down to us to have the big picture for our communities and this organization to give us the training to go back and do that successfully. And so if we do all of that, if GEDA lives up to what we all want it to be, what it has been, what it can be, then I think, and all the folks I talk to think, that GEDA's role in this state is going to continue to grow and continue to be more important. And that's why we're involved, that's why you've been involved all these years, and that's what's going to be successful. Now, I don't know about you, I'm probably not going to be here in 50 years for this celebration. I'm going to try. I got my reservation today. I'm sure we'll be back at the Hyatt, right? Where else would we go? But maybe my son might be here in 50 years. And I kind of start thinking about that for a minute. Are they going to be celebrating this list of achievements that we've had over the last 50 years? The challenges that they're going to face are going to be a lot different than the challenges that we've faced. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is we're still going to have the opportunities to be successful that we've had. And it all comes down to this organization. And so I appreciate the opportunity to kick this off today. I appreciate all of your investment in GEDA and the success that we've had. And you know, I always say, y'all have heard me say this before, GEDA members, local economic developers, you're kind of the unsung hero. You know, your local leaders are chewing you out, getting all on you when you don't have an announcement every month, right? It's a wonderful feeling. But the fact is you're toiling in the fields a lot of time. And then you're driving home one day and you look over and there's a company that wasn't there 3 years ago, and the company's there because you helped recruit them to town. And you see your neighbors go in the door and they have a job. And they can tithe at church, and they can coach Little League and get involved in their community because they have a job. You give them hope, you give them opportunity. And so on behalf of all those Georgians over the last 50 years that have a job in one of those facilities that you helped recruit, thank you. Thank you very much. You deserve to give yourself a round of applause for that hard work. So thank you very much. This is where you give yourself a round of applause. It's a group we got to work on. Stretch. So let me tell you about this one time at band camp. Tim said, see Tim, he said, get it to the point. I did that, got it done pretty quickly. No, I'm not getting any help. Do we have any questions from the audience today? Really? Nobody's going to help me out up here? Ma'am. Thank you. Whatever you want, Joanne. So it's interesting. I think most of you were part of the competitiveness initiative that the governor launched in 2011. Through that effort, we talked to thousands of Georgia businesses all over the state, and we took to the governor and to the General Assembly 15 to 18 pieces of legislation, everything from regulatory reform to tax reform, you name it. And over the last 2 years, the General Assembly has passed every one of those, and thank y'all for that. That's worth applause. And it's interesting, Joanne, we asked an economist, Jeff Humphrey's old boss, we asked him, he says, talk about why Georgia's had this success. And he said, I can draw a direct correlation between the work that the General Assembly did in the business community on the Georgia Competitiveness Initiative and many of the announcements that we've had over the last couple of years. And so earlier this year, the governor asked us to reconvene that group. We were in Atlanta a couple of weeks ago. We'll be in Dahlonega in mid-October. We'll be in Tifton, Elmer. Can I say we'll be in Tifton? Excuse me? October 23rd in Tifton and October 16th in Dahlonega, right? Put those on your calendars. But basically what the governor's asked us to do is to go back out and get input again from businesses about the types of things that we need to do. And so we've been talking mainly about taxes. We'll also be talking about workforce and some other issues like that. And so if you'd like to come and talk about issues that you see that the state ought to be addressing, please come to one of those two meetings. We have public opportunity. We have opportunity for legislators to come and share with us ideas that they've got that they might want the business community or economic developers to hear. And we'll do that through October and then hopefully be able to go to the Georgia General Assembly with some other things that we can do to improve the economy as we go forward. Senator, Mr. Chairman.
One of the things, you're trying to kill a little time. I want to do that and help you.
Thank you. I need all the help I can get.
One of the things that a lot of the state folks tell me they can't lobby, but I think microphone, you know, that's one of the things. Everybody here knows me. I got a big mouth. But I want all of the senators that are in the room to stand up so that, you know, you might know your local senator, you might know a senator or two around the state, but I want to ask all the members of my Economic Development Committee and any of the senators that are here, most of them are sitting up here in front of the room, and I want to introduce them so that you can put a name and a face together. Senator Steve Gooch is the vice chair of my committee. Senator John Albers on the committee. Senator Don Dell James. Stand up, Tyler. Although Tyler Harper's not on the committee, because he brings a great influence in from South Georgia. And I know I can't miss Jeff Bowles. Where's Jeff Bowles at? You can't miss Jeff Bowles. Everybody here knows Jeff Bowles. Senator Mike Dugan over here. From Carrollton, one of the things that I'm going to ask Jay Roberts if you would to introduce the House members.
Your chairman's here.
I don't see Ron in the room.
Yes, your chairman's here.
Chairman, I'm sorry. I was texting to see if you were here. But how about introducing
He doesn't text.
the House members, sorry?
Ugh. Thank you, guys. I want to make one more comment to follow up on what both you guys said. We just got back from our Washington fly-in. I know some of you went with us up there. And what really struck us in Washington, it wasn't that Congress was arguing about the president. They do that. It wasn't that the Republicans were arguing against the Democrats, because they do that too. What was strange to us is to listen to the Senate and the House argue against each other. And I'll tell you, being at the Capitol every day, to all of you out there, we're blessed in Georgia that we've got a Senate and a House that work together, Democrats and Republicans that work together, that work with the executive branch. And I know that sounds, well, of course they do. Well, sometimes that's a novel approach. And to all of y'all, that's because y'all work at it, and we appreciate all of you in that. Stretch it out a little bit more. So listen, one of the things we talk about, there's a lot of how many people in here, this is your first time at GEDA? Wow. Okay. Well, welcome, welcome, welcome. So what we tell a lot of folks when you first come to GEDA, particularly when you're young and you're coming into the industry, is you've got a lot of folks to learn from, listen to them, and you can learn all that you need to know, and it's a very supportive atmosphere that GEDA creates for you to build those relationships. Sometimes I think, though, when you're somebody younger, you're coming in, well, I don't need to be here. I don't need to be as part of this. There's not a lot I can learn. Well, let me tell you, we've all been there. We've all had a first time at GEDA not knowing anybody. We've all had the first visit to the community from the state economic developers. And the folks in this room have been key for me personally to learn and grow. And I'm reminded a minute ago, I saw a man walk in the back door that helped me tremendously, and I was reminded of a couple of lessons that he told me. Jim Steed is back there. And Jim, we appreciate all that you've done over the year. And so long time ago, Jim was deputy commissioner at the Department of Economic Development. And I was running the development authority in a little town called Hawkinsville, Georgia. I don't know if I have anybody from Hawkinsville with me. You can applaud for Hawkinsville. Thank you very much. And so Jim told me that we needed a new industrial park and we need to get a spec build and get all this done. And I said, yes, sir. And so the community went out, and I was very, very young with a lot of hair at the time. And we went out and bought a new piece of property. And I invited Jim down, as y'all all still do, to tell the community what we needed to do because they wouldn't listen to me, right? And so Jim came down, blue suit, blue pinstripe suit. I remember Jim, black shoes, red tie. Not a stretch, right? That was the uniform. So he came and told Rotary Club in Hawkinsville, this is what y'all need to do to be successful. And so they listened, and after it was over, Jim said, well, I got a meeting back with the governor this afternoon. I said, well, before you go, Jim, can I drive you out to our new industrial park, and you tell me the best place to put a spec building? I know if you guys are going to sell this is a partnership, let's go. And so Jim said, that's fine, Chris, but hurry, I got to be back. This is an important meeting. I think you're probably getting some money to close a deal. And so we went through a 90-degree afternoon. We went through this cornfield in Hawkinsville, and we were down in the bottom of the field, and Jim said, Chris, that rise up there is the best spot for a building. I said, okay. He goes, let's drive over there. I said, yes, sir, we'll drive over there. He says, well, you shouldn't drive through there. That looks like mud. I said, that's no problem. It's a four-wheel drive truck. Not a big deal at all. About 5 minutes later, the mud was up on both sides of the truck. Couldn't open the doors. And Jim said, well, rock it. Well, you can't rock it at that point. I thought, and all I could think to myself was, I have the deputy commissioner here. I've been on the job about 6 months. I'm going to be fired today, and I'm never going to get another project in my community. And so Jim said, well, what do you want to do? He says, you better call some help. He says, I got to get back. And so the cell phones at that time weren't very good, and I couldn't get a signal. So I rolled down the window, and I crawled out through the mud and started hiking to get to a signal so I could call a tractor to come pull us out and city manager to come get us. And Jim got a little hot sitting in that truck, and after a little while in that blue pinstripe suit and that red tie and those black shoes, crawled out through the door or the sunroof, I can't remember which, up to your knees in mud. And about that time, the city manager showed up. He said, all right, Chris, I got a tractor to come and get you. And I said, well, Jim, we'll get this out, and then we'll take you, get cleaned up, and get you back on there. He goes, no, you're good. You stay here all afternoon. This guy's driving me back to town, which he did. And I remember having to call my boss that afternoon and saying, I blew it, and I blew it. But Jim, that's the type of thing that's helped all of the communities that you've worked with. And I see Randy back here and Glenn and all our other friends and longtime supporters of GEDA. And I know there's 1,000 other stories out there. But the fact is that you come and you go, and that's what GEDA is all about. Can I stop now, Tim? Good? Am I good? You want to throw me a lifeline? Great. Thank you all very much. The show's over. The best I had. Sorry.
Chris, one more thing. Don't get away just yet. We've got something to present to you on behalf of GEDA. We're making a contribution for all our speakers to Read Across Georgia.
Oh, First Lady.
Yes, our First Lady
Thank you very much.
Deals program. So, thanks much, Chris. And while we've got a few minutes here, obviously I'm not the speaker that you're all waiting for, but we've got a number of people that have participated in pulling this program together, and they're showing on the slide as it's rotating. I don't know if you can go back to the slide with the volunteers, but we've had a number of volunteers that have helped pull this conference together. We've talked about the sponsors. Please go visit them at the break. We'll be doing that soon. But the volunteers, they have contributed to this program with their efforts, their time, and in some cases, they have been a part of the program, as Chris has today. So please, when you get a chance, thank these folks that have been volunteers on our committee to organize this annual meeting. It wouldn't be possible without you being here, but it wouldn't be possible without them either. And with that, Mike Pennington is going to give us some announcements and updates that we need for some of the other things coming up on the rest of the agenda.
I know I'm certainly the last guy you guys want to see up here, but some announcements about tonight, since we are in stretch mode. We're having a little party tonight across the, right downstairs on the water, and we want all of you to come. We got some fun things planned. You may not know, but in 1988, we sealed a time capsule. That's 25 years ago, for those of you doing the math, Mary Ellen doing the math. And we're going to open it tonight. So you're going to see things that haven't been seen in 25 years. I don't know if there's animals or any noxious fumes or anything that's going to jump out and get us, or some practical joke that you guys did. Anybody who was here when the time capsule was sealed 25 years ago in 1988? Of course, Jim Steed was there. He's never missed a conference in his life. There's a whole lot of course, the five of y'all were here in 1988. So there's a lot of folks who were here. So if there's anything I should need to know, if y'all could pull me aside, I've got extra drink tickets for you if there's something I need to know that's going to jump out and get us. But please be there tonight. The reception starts at 6:30 in the Harborside room. There are 2 sets of elevators to get there. The one to go down to parking that's right over here underneath, that will take you down to River Street. It's right across the water. Or back in the corner by the Savannah room, there's elevators that will go there and they'll take you into the Harborside room. We start at 6:30. We have tons of food. Don't go eat anywhere else because I bought a lot of food for you. We have drinks, which is more important. We have Benedetto guitars. If you remember about 5 years ago, Bob White brought us Benedetto guitars as our entertainment. They're back for more. It is Savannah Jazz Fest is this week. The coordinator of Savannah Jazz Fest is with Benedetto Guitars, and he put together this 4 guys to play guitar for us tonight. It should be fantastic. We've got a slideshow of memorable projects through the last 25 years that's going to be playing in the background the whole time. We've got some fun surprises I'm not going to tell you about. You have to go to find out about it. But the main festivities will be at 7 o'clock. So we're going to open the doors at 6:30 and get you plowed with some liquor, and then we're going to have the fun really start at about 7 o'clock. So if you're going to go out and play on River Street, at least wait till about 7:30 or 8 before you decide to take off, because we have some fun stuff planned. I'll go ahead and do some stuff about tomorrow, the afternoon activities. Just so you know, we have golf, we have a SCAD tour, and we have the beach trip. So if you are a golfer, please listen. If you are a golfer tomorrow, you can take the river taxi, the river ferry, which is free. It leaves from right here behind the Hyatt, goes straight to the Westin. There's a shuttle that will take you to the golf course. If you need to be on the 11:30 or the 12 o'clock shuttle, 11:31 and 12:01, you will have missed the ferry. 11:30 and 12 o'clock, you can ride over free. If you ride at 12:30, you will likely miss the tee time. Or you can drive straight across the bridge, take a right, and you're at the golf course. Those going on the SCAD tour, SCAD will pick us up at 2 o'clock, right out front of their bus. You can't miss it. Lunch is on your own. The Tybee tour, lunch is on your own. And at 1:30, I think, of the bus, we have transportation coming to the turnaround. It will pick you up, take you there, and bring you back. So that is our stuff for tomorrow, I think. That's all I need to tell. What else do I need to know? I think that's good stuff. Mobile app. Raise your hand if you've downloaded the mobile app. That's fantastic. If your hand's not up, download the mobile app. You can do it for BlackBerry or for Droid or for Apple or whatever you got. There's a mobile app. The printout agenda in your name tag, it's wrong as soon as we print it. There's always something wrong on it. We can always update the mobile app. Well, I'm going to get to that, Charlie. That's the cherry on top of the entire week. I'm building up one thing at a time. So there's a guy named Charlie Gatlin sitting over to my right he's a recording artist. I have the Blue Cat CD at home. Can We Dance With Your Dates, I think is the name of the album. I have that at home. It's fantastic music. So Charlie, along with, I'm gonna start naming names. I'm gonna forget people and I apologize. Along with Greg Mullis and David Lucky, Scott McMurray, Annie Baxter, who am I forgetting, Charlie? Who else is it? Of course, Bob White, the tallest crooner in the history of GEDA. That's the GEDA All-Star Band. About 5 years ago, they said, this is it. We're not playing anymore. We're done. We're not playing again. They came back. So this is the farewell tour part 2. This time we mean it. It is tomorrow night. It will be in the Scarborough room, which is right downstairs, those 4 rooms along the river. They are going to be jamming from like 7 to 10. Those guys are just going to go forever. So come, have some fun with us. If you want to go to dinner, if you have to leave, go, come back. They'll still be going. Those guys don't stop. GEDA All-Star Band tomorrow night, the farewell tour, This time we mean it. Anything else? Have I forgotten anything else, Charlie? Am I good there, or? Okay. Am I still stretching? Tim, where are we? Door prizes. Hey, Mary Ellen, do you want to give some money away? Does anybody want money? Anybody need any cash? No? Okay, don't worry about it. They don't need any. If anyone here is actually, and this is another silly thing, but if anyone here is on Twitter or likes to tweet, we do have a hashtag for the conference, GEDA AC13. So if you want to tweet while you're here, you can do that through the mobile app too. You can talk about how fantastic this conference is. It's the best ever. Come on in. Don't be shy. Is staff eligible?
No. All right. Oh,
This drawing brought to you on behalf of the Governor Deal, and
just do two? Okay. We have $50 from Screven County Development Authority. Dory Bacon, thank you.
give Screven County a round of applause. All right, let's follow the rules here a little. Let me go over the rules a little bit. When we announce somebody's name, you applaud, okay? Got that? From this point forward, we got it, all right? All right, Screven County, Dory. Who says economic developers can't learn? And Harris Lowry of RAI, we expect some celebrating. I saw him come in the back. Harris, you're standing. Oh, that hurts.
No, I guess not.
No, you got to be in the room and seated. We just went over the rules, Mike. Rob Gordon, Carl Vinson Institute of Government. Rob, come on down. The Institute of Government is hosting or doing some additional training, I think December the 5th for economic development professionals, right, Rob, in Athens? Good. Fantastic. Good.
All right, we have one more. We have $100 cash, $50 from Madison Morgan County Chamber of Commerce, Bob Hughes. You got him trained. You are trained. And $50 from Joe Tanner and Associates, Steve Allen. Thank you.
All right. Our next winner, Lisa Ingram. Lisa. That's pretty bad.
That's bad.
Even I'm not going to joke about that one.
$100.
For $100, Peggy Jolly, Georgia Power Company.
Thank you, that's it.
All right, drinks at the next staff meeting are on Peggy, team.
Okay, who here is a certified economic developer? Anybody? Raise your hand. Hi, be proud. All right, look around the room, folks. Georgia has 68 active certified economic developers. We're behind only Texas, and we're gunning for them. We're working hard for it. We offer professional development grants. We pay for you to go learn how to be a certified economic developer. We do the stuff here. You're getting points. If you're a certified economic developer, you're getting points right now towards your recertification. We host a prep course. Joy Wilkins, is Joy here yet? She was on her way. There she is. Joy, don't sit down. Stand up. Stand up. Stand up. Joy Wilkins won our Committee Chair of the Year award last year because she worked more than staff did last year for GEDA. She has been so good the last couple of years in giving money away to people to go get economic development training and be better at what you do for a living. She's the one who's been giving all that money away. She's the one who created a CFD prep course, where we have one of the few courses in the country that IEDC recognizes as a prep course for certified economic developers. And so we're gunning for Texas. And to that end, we just had our prep course in April. We're now hosting the exam. The exam will be here in December. If anyone is close to or ready to sit for the exam, the second weekend in December, the exam will be in Atlanta. We want more people from Georgia. We want more people to take it in general, but we want a lot of people from Georgia to go sit for that exam, and we want Texas to get nervous because we're gunning for them. They're only behind by about 15 people right now, and we're coming after them. So if you have friends or you have folks that work in your communities, anybody who's ready to sit for that certified economic developer exam, we'll pay for you to go get more training. We'll train you. We'll give you the prep course to get ready for the exam, and you can take it right here in your backyard. We're doing what we can to help you guys become certified economic developers. Martha Schoonmaker, who can't be with us today, she was the one who really led the charge for so many years in GEDA being the home and the place that did so much work to help people become certified. Not certifiable. That's different altogether. Certified. So thanks to the people like Martha and Annie Hunt Burris and Joy Wilkins and so many others who have done all that work to help that many people, you saw those hands go up, become certified economic developers. So thank you to all that group. And I think I was given a 1-minute warning about 38 seconds ago. I think we're actually getting ready. So if you can, just sit tight. Governor Deal is, I think, in the building and on his way in, and he'll give his remarks, and First Lady Deal is here as well. So they should be here any moment now. You can talk amongst yourselves quietly. I'll give you a topic. No, I won't give you a topic.
We have a few guests that have arrived, and it's my pleasure to introduce the introducer. He's chairman of our Gainesville and Hall County Development Authority and CEO of Wilhite Packaging, very involved in our community and around the state, and a past chair of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, Philip Wilhite.
Thank you so much, Tim. It's great to be here. This is quite an honor for me to be allowed to come down and be a part of y'all's anniversary program, and I'm thrilled to do it, but what is even more thrilling is I get to do something that I really enjoy doing, and that's introducing the governor to a great group of people that have been so supportive and have helped build this state to the level that it is today. So I'm glad to be here. I'm looking out here and I see so many friends, people I've worked with over the years in the state, and it's just great to be here. Let me tell you a little bit about our governor so we can get him up here. Governor Deal, as y'all know, was born in Millen and raised in Sandersville, Washington County. He attended the local high schools there. Both of his parents were teachers, and that's kind of began Nathan's love for education and his respect for it. He went from Washington County to Mercer. He graduated with his undergraduate and law degree from Mercer. I think he graduated in 1966. Went on to the JAG Corps, and he graduated with honors, obviously. Went on to the JAG Corps for 2 years from that. Got married to Sandra Dunnigan, who is with us today. And she talked him into it. Yes, give Sandra a hand. And Sandra did a great day's work. She talked him into moving to Gainesville. And that's where he set up his law practice. And while there, we got to be friends through JCs and a number of other things. Nathan was very, very active in our community at that time, from a juvenile court judge, assistant DA, law practice. He was JC's Young Man of the Year, and just recently was named as Gainesville Rotary Club's Old Man of the Year, if you would. In 1979, he just called me one Monday morning, said he had decided he was going to run for the state senate to take Howard Overby's place. So my father and I got on the phone, and those of you that are Rotarians know that this is against all Rotary bylaws and rules, but we raised enough money at Rotary that day to fund that campaign for him, which he one-handed. I think we actually used a Talmadge overcoat in which we did that with. A very effective way of doing it. Well, he served in the state Senate for 12 years, where he just did a marvelous work. He was president pro tem, and on several occasions was elected as the senator with the highest ethical standards. Well, he decided about 1991 that he was going to go to Washington, D.C. and replace Ed Jenkins as our congressman. It was a tough battle. He won that, and he served for almost 18 years, as y'all know, and did a marvelous job, served with great integrity for our community, and represented us well. His last vote before he resigned was it's kind of ironic because it's going on today still, was to vote against Obamacare. And he walked out of the chambers, resigned to come home and run for governor full time. And that worked, as you know. He was elected governor through a hard-fought battle. He's done an absolutely marvelous job since then. During the campaign, as we traveled around the state, I listened to Nathan time and again. His mantra was jobs, 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 something everyone in this room identifies with. He knew what we needed to do to get ourselves out of this hole, and he did it. I think as you will notice what we've been able to do over the last 3 years, I think it's On Numbers survey did a survey that showed that he has actually put his hand on 75,000 jobs that he and his staff have been directly responsible for, and that was with the help of people like y'all and the legislature and the community he's working with. But actually 177,000 new jobs have been created since the governor took office. And I think that's a phenomenal number, and it deserves a hand. Currently, we're rated as the third best state to do business. Now, if y'all know Governor Deal like I do, you know he's competitive, and it's his goal to be #1 state to do business. And I think with the help of the people in this room and with the policies and plans that he has in place, we're going to make that goal a reality very soon. Please join with me in giving a warm welcome to the great governor of the state of Georgia, Nathan Deal.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Senator and I are honored to be with you today. Nice to see so many legislators there getting primed and ready to come back to Atlanta as the session is going to start in the not too distant future. But it's nice to see so many of you, like Philip said, that I've had the opportunity to work with over certainly the 3 years, or almost 3 years now, that I've had the opportunity to serve as your governor. And thanks for what you're doing in your local communities. You know, some people would say, you don't need to do anything to promote economic development. It's going to just come on its own. It's just a natural way of life. Well, I think all of you know that there is certainly some truth to that. If you create all of the atmosphere, there's going to be growth that's just going to happen because the right things are in the right places. But certainly, we know that it takes a lot of effort. And if you do the right things, you'll have even better results at the end of the day. As Philip indicated, we have had somewhere in the neighborhood of that 177,000 jobs that have come to Georgia since I became governor, or at least new jobs that have been created. About 100,000 of those were not actively recruited by the state or perhaps even by your local economic development organizations, but they came as a result of some of the other factors that were in place. But through the Department of Economic Development, working with you as the local counterparts, we can directly point to about $14.8 billion of capital investment and about 76,000 new jobs that are the direct result of the state working with you throughout our entire state to bring those jobs here. And those are the ones that probably without your efforts would not have materialized. So congratulations to all of you. Just an example, here in Chatham County, we had a hand, and you had a hand, in creating more than 1,200 jobs during the time frame since I've been governor, including some at Gulfstream and at Great Dane. And in truth, we have had major successes as a result of some of the actions of the members of the General Assembly, and several of them are here today. And they're working with me and with my team to try to make this the best state in which to do business. You heard some of the big names that we've talked about over the last year: Caterpillar, Baxter International, and most recently, Engineered Floors, which is going to be building plants up in the most highest unemployment rate in our state, up is in northwest Georgia. So those are the good signs. Those are the big components of new job growth. And I think that we would not have had that happen without a number of ingredients that made those things occur. He's not here, I don't think. That is Chris Kaminsky. But Chris, of course, as you know, has headed up our Department of Economic Development. You probably have also heard that Chris will be leaving us very shortly and will be going back to the private sector. I know that he will have great success there because he has the ingredients that it takes to be successful leading our state in economic development, and certainly will be successful in the private sector. Fortunately, we think we have found someone who is equally capable of filling his shoes and taking this state forward, and that's Chris Carr, who will begin work in November. So, you know, I'm beginning to think people think that you have to have the name of Chris as a part of your ingredient to be hired in my administration, and that is not necessarily true, Chris. He's not in my administration, but he is a good close friend and leading the chamber in its efforts. And my chief of staff is named Chris. I'm now getting another Chris. I have one of my security teams named Chris. I even have a son-in-law named Chris. So when I say Chris, I'm pretty well going to hit somebody in the process of calling that name. But to each of you who bring jobs to our state in your communities and working with us at the state level, congratulations, 50 years. That's a long period to have a success story like we have here in Georgia. Now, you have heard me say, and I'm going to continue to say it, my number one goal is to make Georgia the number one state in the nation in which to do business. I know there are a lot of ingredients that have to be put in place to make that happen. And I have some say over some of them, and some of them I don't have any say so over. But we try to make all of them come together in an appropriate fashion. But you know, the reason that I think being the best state in the nation in which to do business is important, the reason it's important, is because it brings jobs to our citizens. And jobs are the best solution to many of the problems that people point to and ask government to solve. If somebody has a good job, they can support themselves and they can support their family. They can do for their church. They can do for their civic community. They can provide contributions for their local jurisdiction. And as a result of that, it takes some of the pressure and expectations off of government. And I don't know about you, but I'd much rather people enjoy their freedom of deciding their lives and their course of action for their lives themselves, rather than government having to try to devise a program that is a one-size-fits-all for solving those problems. So that's my basic ingredient. Now, we have done some things, though, that I think have facilitated some of this growth. The General Assembly has been extremely cooperative, and I hope that you will congratulate these members of the General Assembly who are here in the audience today and have been a part of your programming. We have had great cooperation from the General Assembly. And let me tell you a few of the things they've done. There are certain basic ingredients that businesses look for in determining whether or not to grow if they're already here, or whether or not to locate here if they're somewhere else. One of those, of course, is tax policy. And we are very fortunate in our state to have great tax policy. In fact, the Tax Foundation ranks Georgia as having the lowest tax burden on its citizens of any state in the nation. That is a good place to be when you're trying to recruit and grow business. But we recognize that there were some things we could do and make it even better. On the personal side of the tax equation, with the result of reforms that the General Assembly has passed, we have now, for all intents and purposes, eliminated the marriage tax penalty on citizens in Georgia. And I think that is a great thing to have happen for us. That lets family units keep more of their own money. It allows them to decide how they're going to build their lives and support their families. We also recognize, though, that having been a state that was a part of the old textile belt, and having seen that type of manufacturing to a large degree evaporate from our shores and go offshore, that if we wanted to be a manufacturing state again, there were some things that we could do to encourage manufacturing growth. And one of those that came out repeatedly as being at the very top of the list was to remove and eliminate sales tax on energy that is used for manufacturing. And the General Assembly voted to do that, and we are rolling that back over a 4-year period. And we truly believe that not only are the announcements we have had in the past associated with that tax reform, but many of the announcements that we almost are for certain going to have in the near future will have a direct relationship to that ingredient of making us a more competitive state for manufacturing. So we are very pleased with that. We also have given local governments the ability to expand the Freeport exemption. And many communities have taken advantage of that, and that too brings jobs. Now, Philip said that we were ranked number 3. My latest indication indicates that Area Development Magazine has ranked us as number 2 in the nation in terms of the state for doing business. And so I can get in good with the General Assembly members here. Let me tell you, let me quote what they said with the reasons. State statutes and sound economic development practices. Those two things are what they cited were why we were in that very high and prestigious position. So all of us have a part in making sure those ingredients are in place. Now, we're going to continue to look for ways to make our state a better place for people to come and to live and to enjoy business growth. You may know that I have reconvened the members of the Georgia Competitiveness Initiative. It was something that I started when I first became governor, and as a result of that group of business people holding town hall meetings in all 12 regions of the state of Georgia, and some of you in this audience were part of that team effort. They came back with recommendations to the General Assembly, and the reforms that I have mentioned were part of the recommendations that they made. We have put that back in place. We're going to continue to examine and try to find better ideas. If we can do things better, we're open to making those kinds of changes. So, thank you for being a part of the growth that our state has already had. Thank you for being good partners with the state of Georgia and all of our various agencies that have to work together. And I think one of the highest compliments that I have received is when people say, you know, I believe the agencies of the state of Georgia are working together better, and they are working with local units of government and economic development organizations across this state better than we have seen perhaps ever, and certainly for a very long time. So thank you for that. I thank you for being a part of making that statement true, and thank you for inviting me to be with you on this very special 50th anniversary.
Thank you, Governor. We do appreciate you being with us today. We love what you have to say. On behalf of GDA, for being here speaking with us today, in lieu of paying you for your kind remarks, a donation has been made in your name to Read Across Georgia.
She's the one who did it.
She is the one who did it. Come on up and join him here. This certificate is for him, but while she's up here, we just kind of changed up the schedule. Where's Mike and Tim? Tim, do we want to go ahead and unveil let's go ahead and do that. We're getting ahead of ourselves, but since you're up here, let me go ahead and we'll get to your remarks in a minute, but I've got to read what your husband says about you. Do you mind if I do that? In a few minutes, I was supposed to come up and introduce our First Lady, but Governor Deal had a better idea, and I'm going with the governor. But basically, our First Lady, Sandra Deal, like her husband, was fortunate to have parents who were teachers, and she later followed in their footsteps, and she has had a passion for children and family and teaching. And I guess that's why none of us was very surprised when she launched Read Across Georgia. I want to read a quote your husband said that best describes maybe you in the program. I took this from the AJC, Governor, so I'll take it for what it's worth. Anyway, that's all I'm saying. The governor said, the First Lady's tour is an example of her dedication and passion for our state's youngest learners. We believe that she is the First Lady to visit every county in the state, as well as visit every school system in the state. By sharing her love for reading with children, parents, and educators in every school system in Georgia, Sandra has helped build a strong education foundation for young Georgians. And I think on behalf of GEDA, she deserves a great round of applause for us because in doing so, she's helping build a very strong future workforce for Georgia. Give her a hand. And on behalf of Read Across Georgia, and to honor all of our speakers at the conference, GEDA will be presenting a check in the amount of $2,000 for your program. Now here's the real check, but we have one to unveil for a photo op for just a second. So if you, Governor, would you come join us?
I'm just glad the AJC got something right.
I know you. And at this time, I think we have one other presentation, so come right on up. And Governor, we'll need you again. Yeah.
Very quickly, in January of this year, Governor Deal had a proclamation commending us on 50 years of economic development. Chairman Stevens in the House passed a resolution commending us on 50 years in economic development, and Chairman Ginn passed a resolution in the Senate commending us on 50 years in economic development. So what we have is over here, and I'd like to get all three of you over here. We've framed the three of them together. This will be downstairs tonight at the reception. You can see this. These three documents, these three gentlemen and the legislative body created for us. So I think that it's a great way for us to say thank you to them for what they've meant to us.
Thanks again. Yes.
I can't pass a mic without saying something. Thank you all for this donation. I already have it spent. I just ordered some books from a young well, I don't know how old he is, a pediatrician who has written a book, Jonah the giraffe with the too long tail. I'd forgotten. But I read it last week to some pre-K children, and they loved it. And I thought, even though I have my Who I'd Like to Be book that I've been reading all over the state that AT&T paid for, and I will continue reading that until I've used them all up, because I give them to the classes as we go around. But I thought it would be nice to change and do a little different book this year so they wouldn't hear the same one as I go about the state. And I'll be reading again next week, because it's important for us to read to these children and to let them know how important it is for them to learn how to read. I want to build their interest in learning how to read and wanting to read and insisting on people reading to them and them reading to others, because that's how we're going to get an educated group of people who can choose what kind of jobs they want to have. No job is too poor for somebody to hold if they really choose that job and want to do it, because there is value in every job and all are needed. But I want every citizen of Georgia to be able to choose what job they would like to have and do it well. And I believe reading is the key. And I thank you all for creating those jobs, because we're trying our best to help educate the workers for your jobs that you're creating. Thank you very much. And thank you for the money.
They've got a busy schedule once again. Thank you so much, Governor and First Lady Deal. Well, I believe we covered the announcement. Do we have any other announcements before break, Mike? Visit the exhibitors and take a quick break, and we'll be back at 3:45. See you in a few minutes.
Commissioners of the Department of Economic Development. It wasn't always known as that, by the way. And we may get a little explanation about that as well. So let's start off by doing one thing for these four people. Would you give them a round of applause for coming today, please? A big GEDA round of applause. Thank you. Yeah, a couple of people even stood up in the back. Okay. We have four people here who I wish we had time. You know, if I read all their resumes to you, we'd be here for an hour and a half or 2 hours, believe it or not. So I'm not going to do that. I'll do a little highlight about these gentlemen, but just start off by saying that these are four of my role models in economic development. And I try to do and emulate everything I learned from all these guys. They are legends in their own time. and in their own mind too, right? Exactly. Okay, on the far end down here is Abbott Massey. Abbott's from Gainesville, Georgia, right? Abbott, give him a round of applause. Abbott's the real historian here for the moment. He's going to give us a little history about what it was like back in 1959 and 60 when he was the commissioner of the Georgia Department of Commerce. Okay? Georgia Department of Commerce. And then Abbott went on to be the president of the Georgia Poultry Federation, something like that. Is that right? Then he was with that organization for 50 years, I think, or more.
Still with him.
Still with him. He's the president emeritus, and he's got a lot of stuff to talk about. Then George Berry is sitting there. George was the commissioner when I joined the department in 1990. But you guys, most of you know George, but you know he was, what do we call it, George? You were with the city of Atlanta, and you were the chief administrative officer, but before that you were the aviation commissioner. Is that what they called it? George was there when the old airport became the new airport. Amazing, but he saw all that and was in charge of making that happen. So that important asset is a critical piece of economic development for Georgia. And here's the man that sat there and watched it happen and made it happen. So he's going to talk a little bit about that. Then we roll down the pike to, I'll go to Randy Cardoza. Randy was, he's an economic developer from way back, right? He was in Conyers, he was in Swainsboro, he was in Augusta. We won't talk about any more of that, but he joined the department. He was with George Berry as a deputy commissioner, and then Randy hired me into the department in 1990. So I owe a lot to Randy for a lot of reasons, but certainly being there and working with him was a privilege and an honor for me. And he's going to talk about what it was like to go from the Department of Industry, Trade and Department of Industry and Trade to Industry, Trade and Tourism, and all the things that went on at that point. And then we roll around to Glenn Cornell. Glenn had a long career with the CNS Bank. Even before that, there must have been a railroad in there somewhere. He's going to tell us about that. And then he thought he retired. And then he became the commissioner of the department somewhere in, what was that, about 03, 04, somewhere in there, Glenn. And so Glenn's going to talk about that. And I had the privilege of working with Glenn as the deputy commissioner when he was there. So we have a world of talent and knowledge. So the format is this. We're going to let these guys talk, tell us whatever they want to tell us about being the commissioner, what it was like, any stories, funny, serious, it doesn't make any difference. And then we're going to have some Q&A at the end for a few minutes. And Mike said that we have to be out of here by 5 o'clock. Is that right, Mike? Where are you? Here you are. Thank you. So we'll be mindful of your time. But let me just start off. We'll let the real historian here start off, Abbott Massey. Abbott, if you don't mind, talk about your experience with the Department of Commerce and maybe a little bit about the forerunner of GEDA, whatever you can remember about that.
Charlie, thank you very much. I'm going to stand just a minute and see if I can get my mind going. And Mike Giles, as many of you know, is our president now at the Georgia Poultry Federation. I'm still working with him every day. He sends his greetings to you. And let me say at the beginning that following Chris Clark and Governor Deal, introduced by Philip Wilhite, and then Charlie Gatlin up here, is somewhat like being asked to talk on floods after Noah, knowing that he's coming back 3 more times after that. But it's good to be here looking around the room. This is a great crowd in numbers and in quality. So it occurred to me that this day has the potential of being a great day for economic development in every other state in the Southeast, because all the other players in Georgia are sitting here in this room right now, and it's good to be close to the river and the port. It's been fascinating to see the ships coming into the Savannah port, but it's very exciting to see the ships going out of the Savannah port, because many of them have Georgia chicken. Just one quick commercial. Georgia on the average day is producing 28.3 million pounds of chicken every day. Over 20% of that is exported. So many of these ships are on the way to Mexico or China or Hong Kong or Russia or somewhere, and we're pleased with that. The governor talked about some of the industries moving. As you well know, some industries and companies are exporting jobs and moving plants. Some are importing products. The poultry industry is exporting chicken and eggs and importing money to help improve the economy of Georgia, and we appreciate the support that so many of you give it throughout the state of Georgia. It's good to see so many of the legislators here who are strong supporters, as the governor's already said, of economic development. We appreciate their support for the poultry industry as well. And I must say that I appreciate Mike Pennington, and appreciate Mike and Tim Evans inviting me to be here. I see Mike at meetings of the Georgia Society of Association Executives. He is a certified association executive and is the chair-elect of the GSAE Foundation, and we appreciate his work there. And looking over the list last night, if I read it correctly, in the first 49 years of GEDA, there were 5 women who served as chairs: Nancy, Margaret, Annie Hunt, Willie, and Peggy. I think most of them are here. And then look at what is happening now. You have in succession Missy and Joanne and Angie. So with my Hall County hat on, I want to thank y'all for having Tim Evans in line as a token male. With Greg to follow him. My daughter Camille sent Lewis and me several years ago some Father Goose poems to supplement Mother Goose. And one of them was Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, Jack jump over the candlestick, Jill be nimble, jump it too. If Jack can do it, so can you. But my favorite is the one Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All of the king's horses, women and men, put Humpty Dumpty together again. Now I'll get on the subject, Charlie.
That's close.
The real predecessor to the departments are represented briefly by me and by these fine folks up here, was the Agricultural and Industrial Development Board. It was created in 1943 in the first year of the term of Governor Ellis Arnold, and it specified that the board members represent the finance, business, industry, and agriculture, and it made the chairman of the Board of Regents or his designee a member. And that bill was introduced by Roy McCracken, who was chairman of the State of Republic Committee. And interestingly enough, at least to me, it was signed by Spence Grayson from Chatham County, by Charlie Gowan, who worked with M.E. Thompson on the purchase of Jekyll Island, by Ben Fortson, who later became Secretary of State, by Elliott Hagan, who at one time was the congressman from this district, and a number of others. So that was in place in 1943. Then in 1949, during the administration and the first year of Governor Herman Talmadge, later senator, of course, to show his priorities, Senate Bill 1 was introduced by Senator Crawford Pilcher and others to abolish the board I mentioned, transfer the funds, which was the high figure of $80,000 at that time, to transfer funds to the new Department of Commerce. The first secretary, as they called it then, of that department was Clark Gaines from Elberton, who served from 49 until mid-1954 when he died. Nelson Shipp, who had been the assistant secretary, was secretary then for the rest of that year, followed by Scott Candler, who had been the sole commissioner in DeKalb County. And then during the administration of Governor Ernest Vanderbilt, I had the privilege of coming in as secretary of the Department of Commerce. Child labor laws weren't as strict in those days. It was easy. It was easy to waive them, so I could accept that position. No other department had the title of secretary. There was no real cabinet situation, so we thought it would be better if the title would change to director, as applied to most of the other departments except for Revenue Commission and maybe one others. So a senator by the name of Carl Sanders introduced the bill that made that change and a couple other changes for the Department of Commerce. And interestingly enough, you'd think that at that time he was representing Richmond County. That was in the days of the county unit system, when except for Chatham and Fulton, the Senate rotated among 3 counties with just 1 county voting. Carl was elected first from Richmond County. Then the next time Jefferson County waived their right and he came again, and then after that Glasgow. So he was in the Senate representing Jefferson County at that time and that district. But he introduced that bill. When I arrived there, Scott Candler had done an outstanding job in industrial development, but I found that there were 27 employees, all reporting to the department head. The budget was $330,000. All department heads received a note from Governor Vanderbilt to cut the budget by 10%. So we redid our budget, dropped it down to $30,000, delivered 1 copy to him and 1 copy to B.E. Thrasher, the auditor, and had no legislative discussions about the budget at that point. One of the things that we wanted to do was to try to help counties that were losing population. And we appreciate the help we received from the University of Georgia and from Georgia Tech, and doing some studies and providing other assistance. And I think Sean McMillan's here, by the way, with Jennifer Fromm. We're pleased that today and President Jerry Moorhead have established an Atlanta office of economic development, and that's going to be of great assistance to everyone. But we had, to try to help counties across the state, as others have done, we had industrial development workshops throughout the state, had one statewide industrial development seminar with the Associated Industries of Georgia, which later merged with the Georgia Chamber to become the business council in the chamber again, represented so well by Chris. We held the first Georgia Industry Week, and among other things held an essay contest for high school students with the slogan, "What Georgia makes Georgia." We're pleased that Cliff Clark invited the governor and me to attend a meeting of his counterparts to tell them what we were doing in Georgia. And one of the interesting experiences I had was when the Woodman of the World was looking for a location for their headquarters, was flying with former Governor Ed Rivers and Lieutenant Governor Garland Byrd, Governor Rivers having been active in the Woodman of the World, to Nashville, Tennessee, to make a pitch for Georgia. We had a good trip. It was great to hear Governor Rivers in action, but we were not successful with bringing WOW to Georgia. When we reorganized the department to have divisions, which they had not had before, we had one for new industry, for existing industry, for information and administration. There was not a good tourist component already there. I thought it was important to have a tourist division, so I did an international search that being to call Bill Hardman in Warner Robins, Georgia, who I knew through the JCs and knew what an enthusiastic promoter he was. Bill came there as the first director of the tourist division, and among other things, working with him, we had the first tourist promotion workshop in Georgia, which then became the Governor's Conference on Tourism, the first in the country. I think most states have them now. We built the first welcome station with the help of Representative Walston Parker and the Highway 301 Association, that being a big order into Georgia at that time. The Parker family donated the land. We built that. It took a change in the law, which Governor Sanders again introduced in the 1960 session to allow vending machines and other things. And Charlie tug my coat when I need to shut up. I'll try to quit in just a minute. But one of my most interesting experiences was after W.T. Jones, the representative from Crawford County, was in Washington for an education meeting. He came back and told me that the AAA was about to put all of Georgia on the blacklist because of the situation in Ludowici, where they had the quick traffic light on 301, where about 2 cars could get through, and then the arrest started. So I called AAA and asked them to please give us a little time. I talked to Jim Gillis, who was head of the highway department, and they agreed to donate the traffic signal if Ludowici would change it. So Bill Hardman and I and somebody from the highway department went to Ludowici. I called Ralph Dawson, the kingpin down there, to set up the meeting. We went to Ludowici. On the way into town, a man flagged us down on a hike, whether he stopped in every car or whether he found out what we were driving. His name was Cecil Chapman, said he represented the Good Government League. He wanted to tell us about the folks we were about to meet with from Ludowici and Long County. And we thanked him and went on to the meeting and was having a good discussion until suddenly the double doors burst open and he and several other people came in. And it was the darndest fight I've ever seen in my life with brass knuckles. A couple of folks had a knife in their hand. Somebody picked up the city seal and was about to hit somebody till a law enforcement officer grabbed his hand. We all took cover as quickly as we could. And then when the fight ended, they left and nothing was said about the fight. The officials sat back down and we continued the discussions. They agreed to change the traffic light. The highway department provided. They put the light up and things went well for a while. And then you remember Lester Maddox put a billboard up down there in later years. So we had many other interesting experiences. But as it relates to industrial development, the ones that have been most meaningful to me have some in the poultry industry with the help of some of these folks. One was back in 1971 when some producers who were friends and members wanted to develop a vaccine for Marek's disease, a viral disease, none being available, and it was devastating flocks. We took them to the University of Georgia College of Veterinary Medicine, and they met with them and helped them start Select Laboratories, a small company making vaccines just for these few individuals. They later started selling to others. That grew into a major company that sold 2 or 3 times, now operates as Merrill Select in Gainesville. They have some close to 300 employees, and they're shipping products to 56 different countries. Another was working with Tim and Charlie and Glenn when Joe Sanderson was looking at locations, and we wanted him to bring the company to Georgia, which he later did, and they did an outstanding job coming to Moultrie and Adel, about a $100 million project, 100 growers who invested about $90 million, and on and on. I think that's when Tim learned about chickens and later was attracted to Gainesville. and we're glad to have him there. We worked with Kegels when they bought the old brewery building in Perry in 1999. Later it was sold, in 2004, it was sold to Purdue Farms, and that's when we brought the Purdue folks to see you, Glenn. The department was very helpful. That has expanded several times since then, and had the privilege of taking Don Jackson, president of Pilgrim's Pride at that time, and a former director of ours, to see Governor Perdue to talk about reopening the Douglas plant that had been put on idle, as they called it. Congressman Kingston passed through this morning and mentioned how persistent Joanne Lewis was in working on that project. So it's been a privilege to work on those for many years, and it's great to be with you here. And before somebody yanks me down, I'll shut up and sit down, but thank you very much.
As you can see, Abbott has more stories than you can imagine that he hadn't even thought of yet, but his mind is working on it now. So hold your questions or your ideas about what you want to ask Abbott, and we're going to go to George Berry now and let him speak for a minute. And please, George.
Well, can I get a minute?
Take as long as you like.
No. I wasn't here this morning for Chris Clark's speech. I'm sure he did a better job than I did 30 years ago. Unbelievable to me. This was my coming out party. I had just been appointed, and my appointment was a surprise to almost everybody. I was the airport manager at Atlanta, and suddenly Governor Harris appointed me to be the head of this department. Now, I'd made a lot of speeches by that time, but I tell you, I had never been more nervous than when I appeared. My recollection is that the meeting was over at Jekyll, and George Rogers introduced me. And one thing I learned is that you can always be sure of a nice introduction when you're being introduced by somebody who's going to work for you. And George gave me a glowing introduction, and I got up and faced what I'm facing right here, not knowing if I would be accepted. I didn't come out of the classic economic development background, but I'd had a burning ambition all my life, and had resulted in me going to work for the city. Henry Grady was a great hero of mine, and he talked about raising a brave and beautiful city as a way of lifting Georgia people up economically. And I tried to make the case that by working with the city and by working in building that great airport, that I was engaged in economic development. Well, nothing since has given me as much pleasure and as much joy and as much relief to find that I was among soulmates. I was among people who nodded their heads and said, yes, right on. I see what you're trying to say. And it became this idea of teamwork, of getting together and making Georgia shine economically, became the hallmark of my 7 years at the department. It was born out of the fact that when I got there, we had just over 100 people in the whole department, and only 20 of these were project managers handling industrial prospects. I was shocked by that. I expected, I don't know what I expected, but much more. And I had Doug Weaver, some of you remember Doug Weaver, who was director of research for the department. I said, find out for me how many people are engaged in economic development in other organizations. Utilities, the Georgia Chamber, the railroads, the banks, major engineering companies. Well, he came back with over 100. And I said, now that will make a team. And so the hallmark of my time there was spent trying to convince everybody that we had a team of 100 people, not 20, in the department. And it worked. It worked. And I think that that these 7 years were probably the best and most fulfilling years, certainly in my entire career. And I'll always be grateful for it. Now, we had certain challenges. We were working on international companies at the time, and I will always remember this. We had an attorney general of the state named Michael Bowers, and he was a nitpicker about everything, and he ruled that we could not give away anything. That would be a gratuity, and it was prohibited by the Georgia Constitution. Well, I'd had some experience at the airport and something similar, so I created a nonprofit corporation called the Georgia Economic Developers Foundation Incorporated, and applied for and got a 501c3 certificate from the Internal Revenue Service. And so people could make contributions to this. Now, I went around telling everybody that the reason we did that was that we needed to buy trinkets to give away to the Japanese, because when they came, they always brought a gift, and they expected a gift. The real reason, which I can now tell, is that the Japanese wanted to go to the Cheetah Club the minute they got to Atlanta. Now, how I ask you, would it sound that I had used Georgia taxpayer dollars to take these guys to the adult clubs? And in those days, and maybe still, that was what Atlanta was famous for. We would have a visitor, and they'd say, "Oh yeah, Cheetah Club," or something, and they had to go. And so that's the reason why the Georgia Economic Developers Foundation still exists. Now, when you all write a check to it, you just remember that's well, you all have, when Annie called me up and said, come the 50th year, my sense of history kicked in again. You know that 50 years is significant, and Abbott talked about it to me, because it's in those 50 years that Georgia committed itself to getting into the economic mainstream of this country. Now, before that, and you can argue about what date it started on, but before that, we were the poor relation of this nation. The year that I was born, I could look forward to making 57% of the national average per capita income, whether I was a mason or whether I was an auto mechanic or a banker or whatever, 57%. And when we ended into the early 2000s, we'd gotten up into the mid-90s. We had almost made it. I was so naive that I thought it was going to happen on my watch. I talked to Governor Harris, if you can believe it, about having a state holiday on the day that Georgia reached 100% of the national average per capita income. A historic moment. Now, unfortunately, the recession came along, and we have now relapsed back into the 80s. Probably Mr. Clark is not going to ask my advice about anything. I don't recall asking my predecessors advice about anything. But we got to get our mojo back, folks. We heard the governor, and he painted a very good picture, and an optimistic picture. But the truth is, we lost more jobs than anybody, just about, in the recession, and we've been slower in getting them back, and the jobs we have been getting back are not of the same quality, so our per capita income has suffered. So my hope is that we can get our mojo back and go back to the spirit and the enthusiasm and the support and the commitment that we've had during the 50 years up to this point.
We've had two very inspiring comments from these two young men. Now we got two young men to come. We're going to go in chronological order, Glenn, so that means Randy's next. Is that okay with you?
Good.
Yeah. Randy Cardoza. Please, sir, tell us all the good stuff.
Well, first of all, George is a true mentor to me, and I have always appreciated the confidence that he had in me by hiring me. he didn't tell you that he called me on my second day as the president of the Dalton Chamber and invited me to come down and talk to him, and then offered me the opportunity to be his deputy. And I said, well, what are we going to do about Dalton? He said, I'll take care of that. Thank you, he did. Somehow or another, I got, because I wanted to be, stuck there. I spent 14 years with the department, and 10 as commissioner, and I've had several people ask me, what was wrong with you? And I guess what was wrong with me is I didn't have enough sense to know there was something wrong with me. But, you know, first of all, Glenn won that door prize. Now, can you imagine? I'm going to strap him on the hood of my car and ride down River Street this afternoon looking for diamond rings if anybody wants to go with me. And we'll probably find some. Taking a little different twist on the way I'd like to talk to you a little about the department. I think we had, when you left, around 225 people, near as I can remember. And we had 11, or somewhere shortly after that, we had 11 foreign offices. A number of them were trade offices. I will tell you this, for many of you younger folks, you won't be able to comprehend this, but when I went to work there in 1986, there were very few people who had a computer. I was one of them. And as time went on, we added computers, and a little joke, a little funny story I'll never forget. We had one project team director who's no longer with us, but a good friend of mine, Bob Waycaster, who it sat on his desk, and if you sent him an email, then you went down the hall with a sticky note and stuck it on the screen and said, turn this on and read your email, which did a little good, I might add. We didn't have cell phones. We wore a pager. And I can remember getting a page and stopping on the side of the road at a gas station or whatever to call back in to find out what I needed to know. So if you think times are tough now, folks, give that a whirl. We eventually got phones, and people had to sign them out, and we had cars, which you still do, I guess, but the line to get hold of a phone was a line everybody wanted to be in front of. But it really made doing the work a lot easier. I recall, I think somewhere in around 1999 probably, getting the first ever electronic RFP that was to be responded to electronically. And that's really not, well, it probably is that long ago, but it doesn't seem like that long ago. But up until then, it was all done on paper. And on the big projects, we'd load up our presentations in a briefcase and send a project manager off to wherever the corporate office was to deliver that, hand deliver it, because it was that important. So working projects was done in a different way, and companies would come and they'd spend 3-4 days with us, looking at all these communities around the state. We'd fly them around, and now they've done all that evaluation before they get here, and if you're getting to see them, you made the first cut. I mean, you know all of this. So it was a different environment and a different time. We had probably 25 maybe at the peak project managers, but as George said, we had an incredible team with the utility companies and with the railroads and with all of you representing communities all over the state. And without that kind of team, not only the teamwork and the people, but the support, the financial support, the resources that all of you were able to bring to the table, we were successful in continuing to win an awful lot of jobs from companies all over the world. Governor Harris enjoyed traveling, and I say enjoyed, I mean he did the international recruitment. Governor Miller liked it, and we did an awful lot of international travel with Governor Miller, worldwide. And I don't know if we made one trip to South Africa, we made a couple to Australia, got into South America, during the last years that I was there, because prior to that, there wasn't that much of a market there. China, I went to a couple of times before I left, but that also was in the late 90s. So, and I'm not sure they still are bringing an awful lot to us. They are on the trade side, but on the manufacturing side, perhaps not so much. One thing that was a hallmark, I guess, if anything, was during the time that George left me. He didn't tell you that. You talk about it. He was surprised when he got appointed. I was in Bainbridge and
Playing golf.
I was not playing golf.
We were fishing.
I was with Glenn and Jim Martin and Millard West, just 4 of us.
Maybe Robinson. I don't know.
I don't know if Ron was there or not. And we were fishing. George liked to accuse me of playing golf. Whenever he called me, he said, "You're playing golf." I said, "No, I'm not playing golf." But I wasn't that day. I was fishing, and I called, and I got Janine, and finally around 6 o'clock, when I got out of the fishing boat, they were standing on the pier saying, "I don't know what's going on in Atlanta, but everybody in the world is looking for you." And I called Janine, and she said, "Have you talked to George?" I said, "No." She said, "Hang on, he's driving in the driveway." And I said, What is this?" And he got on the phone, he said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm in Bainbridge." "You're playing golf." "No, I'm not." "Yes, you are." "No, I'm not." "Yes, you are." "No, I'm fishing." He said, "Well, get your butt back up here because I'm resigning in the morning and you're it." And you could have thumped me in that lake with your finger. So anyway, Glenn and Millard and Jim Martin and I drove back home that night, and the rest is history. But the Olympic Games, and was in the big room in Tokyo when they announced the city of Atlanta. We seized on that opportunity. We being primarily was led a lot, mostly by Georgia Power with their Operation Legacy. And from that incredible opportunity that having the Olympic Games presented to the state of Georgia to really put us on the world map, we were able to do an awful lot of marketing. We got an enhanced marketing budget, which came when the Olympics went away. It went away, but that's how that works. But and Charlie was a huge piece of that. I mean, if y'all knew how much work he did on marketing Georgia during the Olympics and putting presentations together and orchestrating a lot of stuff, I mean, you owe him a round of applause. You really do, because he did. He did an incredible job because a lot of that fell on him. But after the Olympics, we continued to work on it, but from the Olympics and from that partnership we have with Georgia Power and ACOG and the department and Glenn at Bank of America and a couple of others, that became the Georgia Allies, and it morphed. I mean, it just happened, and it shifted to the department. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Georgia Allies, it is an incredible team of people who bring not only people but tremendous amount of money that augments everything that the department can do by marketing Georgia worldwide and being very effective at it. And so and other states have tried to emulate it, and they can't make it work. They always ask, how do you get all these competing entities together to work together and not fight amongst themselves? Well, I don't know. It works. And I'm going to stop. We had lots of... One real quick thing. We'll tell you a story because we're in Savannah and Jim Ewan's in here. We're working JCB. Working it hard. And this is kind of how incentives worked then. It didn't have a lot of formality to it. Jim was over making our final pitch in England, sitting in the chairman's office. I was in Columbus at a board meeting, and I got a call on my cell phone, had one then, and it was Jim, and he said, "We're $1 million short." Sir Anthony just got up, left the room, said, "I give you, a half hour or an hour, something like that, to either find the money or we're going to South Carolina." And I didn't know where Governor Miller was. Called, and he was somewhere, and anyway, I finally was running out of time, and I called Jim back and I said, "You give them the $1 million, and I hope I'm still here when you get back." and that was the truth. But thankfully, about the time he was given $1 million, I finally reached Governor Miller, and he said, "Well, absolutely." Thank you. That's how you pull deals together at the last minute. Thank you.
We're going to have Glenn Cornell talk, and then we'll do a little Q&A here in a minute.
I fully realize I'm the last thing between you and drinks, so I'm going to be fairly quick. I'm going to go back just a little bit. This is the 50th anniversary of GEDA, and I go back to 1963. I don't know how many people in here are old enough to have been involved in this process, this business for 50 years, but I went to work for Southern Railway out of college, and I moved to the Industrial Development Department of Southern. It was Southern then, it wasn't Norfolk Southern, it was way before the merger. And went to the Industrial Development Department. We were located in the Georgia Power Building at 270 Peachtree Street. That's where I met Jack Talley 50 years ago nearly. So I've been involved in this business for 50 years. I remember when GIDA, in those days it was GIDA, was created, and we met at the top of the Mart. You've heard this story there on Peachtree Street, and we had maybe 2 tables. It was basically made up of the statewide development organizations. In those days, we had 8 railroads, 8 or 9 railroads. We had utility companies, not many banks involved at that early stage. Of course, the department and some others. And out of that grew the Georgia Industrial Development Association, which is now GEDA. I was there with the railroad for about 8 years. They wanted to move me to D.C., the headquarters. I didn't want to go to D.C., so I went over to the Department of Economic Development. My first opportunity, Department of Industry, Trade, and Tourism, to go over to that department in 1968. I was there 2 years during Maddox's administration and 4 years of President Carter's administration. I went to work for a guy named General Lewis Truman. He had been the commanding general of the Third Army at Fort Mack. And Governor Maddox brought him in to run the Department of Economic Development. He kicked tail and took names. He was a guy that was accustomed to the hierarchy of the military, and pretty much everyone pretty much afraid of him. So it was that kind of environment that we were in at that time. All of you know about the Rip Wiley Award. Rip Wiley was there. I had first worked for a year in the research division, went down to work with Bill Burke and Rip Wiley in the industry division, became the assistant in the industry division under Rip. And those are the times when we first began to do international development. YKK located their zipper plant in Macon, Georgia in 1972. In 73, the state of Georgia opened the office in Tokyo and Brussels. So we began under Governor Carter, under President Carter, 73. That's the first really effort to do substantial international development. It was interesting, the announcement over the last few months about opening the new office in China 50 years later, or almost 50 years later, 40 years later. In those days, in 73, 85, China wasn't even an issue. There was no potential. It's kind of like Latin America over those years. There really wasn't any reason to do much international business. But we started that process. That's the first time I had an opportunity to do international business, and I traveled with General Truman a lot. As I said, General Truman was a pretty tough guy. And he called me in one day and he said, "Glenn, I'm pretty disturbed and disappointed that you keep losing these good people from the department." And we had some really good people. I hired Jim Steed way back years and years ago, but we had people like Dave Gladney and Mike Lott and Mike Easterly and Tony Reed, some really good, aggressive young people. But we knew that they were on a stop there to go do something else. And so my response to General Truman was, well, really, General Truman, the only alternative we have to losing good people is not to have any good people. He had never, in the military, he had never even thought about that issue. He looked at me really funny. And from that day forward, we were pretty good friends. But I moved on. In those days, we were about the same size, I guess, as a little bit smaller than we are. We still always, probably it's still true today, the bulk of the people in this department work for the tourist division, run the welcome centers around the state. And so it was sort of the similar kind of, our mission as Governor Deal said so well earlier, is the creation of jobs and the creation of additional tax base. That was our driving issue. How we got there was up to a multitude of people. The department has always been about the people there. It's always been that. And so we did the things we needed to do to move on. It's been forward a number of years, and I come back again in January of '03. Governor Perdue called me in first week of January in '03 and said, how about coming and run the Department of Economic Development, Industry, Trade, and Tourism, excuse me. I don't think so, Governor. I'm about to retire. I mean, I'm planning to retire in July from the bank. I'd always planned to retire when I was 63. And he said, well, think about it over the weekend and call me. So I talked to my wife. We talked it over and said, well, it's probably be a good thing to do. So I went back and I told the governor at that time, I said, I'm not going to be here for your whole term. I'll stay with you 2 or 3 years. I stayed 2, and for personal reasons, I needed to move on. So we did that. But again, I can't say enough about the people who are there, have been there. You can look around and you can see them, some of them today, some of them gone on to do other things. When Craig Lesser came to replace me, that's the piece of advice I give him is don't screw around with these people. And especially don't screw around with Charlie Gatlin. Charlie, I said to them, Charlie is a stabilizing force in this department. Don't mess with him. Just let him go do his job. But it's been great. I think the department's done tremendous work, been very successful. The 501c3 that George mentioned, the Georgia Corporation for Economic Development, is really the same organization Randy talked about as Georgia Allies. The Georgia Allies are the operating group that's worked for the corporation. So George created the vehicle to generate some additional funding for economic development, and the Allies actually are the people out there with our allied groups doing most of the work. That's how the department works. We have to. The state of Georgia, the Department of Economic Development, doesn't sell Georgia. We expose Georgia. You people out there in the community sell the state. The prospects that we're dealing with know that whomever's working with them from the department is going to go work on another project next week, and they're going to have to live with you and your leadership in your community. So you're the people, when we expose the prospects or the opportunities to the communities, you're the ones that have to close the deal. That's the bottom line. Some people close the deal better than others. Hopefully we as a group are going to close the deals better than South Carolina and Alabama or to North Carolina. And we've done a pretty good job with that. The business has changed. We did a couple of things while I was there in the little 2 years I was there. We changed the name. Abbott mentioned the Department of Commerce. At some point in time, they try to keep adding things that we did, the functions that we did to the name. And finally, economic development got so broad that we couldn't include all of them, so we said, okay, let's be inclusive. It's the same decision-making process that GIDA made sometime in the 70s, late 70s, I think, to make it GEDA, because it's more encompassing. Now, we have technology, of course, the film industry, all the things we do, and tourism is still a huge issue for the state of Georgia. So we changed the name. We did that through legislative process. We also moved the office. As all of you, many of you remember, we were at Peachtree Center. Parking and access was not great, so we decided we'd move out to 5th Street near Georgia Tech, and we would have easier access and better parking and be able to interact with our allied partners better. So we did that. I got to tell one little story on myself. 2003 and 2004 were very difficult years budget-wise for the state. And I know we have Ron and Jeff and some other legislators in here, unless they left with the governor, I'm not sure. But they can just sort of put their fingers in their ears when I tell this story, because during the 2004 legislative session, Governor Perdue and OPB, Office of Planning Budget, came out with some directions for the departments, and they said, you're going to have to prioritize all of your functions
make a list in priority order, and we're going to cut 10%, and you need to cut them from the bottom of your priorities. Well, in order to protect the functions that we had that were important, I came up with this great idea that I was going to cut out the pass-throughs that came through our department. And I went to talk to the governor about it. He said, well, it's your department. You do what you want to, but you ought to understand you're really going to get beaten up with the legislature. I said, I know it. I know I'm going to, but I'm going to do it anyway, Governor, because I'm going to protect the major functions that we're going to do. Well, I didn't have any idea how bad I was going to get beaten up. I'm still bruised up about that. A couple other things. A couple of stories, and anybody who has been involved in economic development very long have got great stories. We were here in Savannah one time on the red carpet tour, Chris. And Chris is another one of those guys that went on to do something else. But and I was standing, we were doing a tour of the harbor with a red carpet group, and we had 100 people probably on the boat. And I was standing there talking to a couple of Japanese prospects, and that was sort of early in the process. And talking to a couple of Japanese prospects, and a guy walked up, and he happened to be one of our guests from the Boeing company. And I was introducing the Boeing guy to the two Japanese, and one of the Japanese said, B-29s. Let me get out of here. Change the subject quickly here. There's a world of great stories. I could talk a lot about some of the things that happened in 50 years of being involved in this business. Let me leave you with one thing. There are a lot of really, really important people in this world. We have doctors, if you can help them decide what's wrong with you, they can fix anything anymore. We have great ministers that can heal your heart. We have teachers that have our future in their hands. And we have terrific public servants, politicians, elected officials, all kinds of really important people in this world. There's no one more important than you. The business of creating jobs and creating tax base is more, as Governor Deal said, is one of the most critical issues we have in this country, in the world. So I want you to be proud every day of what you do. Thank you.
You know, I wish we could go on for a longer time. We've got 6 minutes, right, Mike? 1-5. I'm sorry, I added up 5 and 1. 15 minutes. So, I know these guys have stirred up all kinds of questions in your mind. Please, it's time to ask them questions if you have them. I'd love to hear from anybody, please. Okay, I'm getting Chris. Oh, you got one. Thank you. Yes, you got a question.
First off, thank you guys for coming here. This is my first GDA conference. I'm super excited. I'm out of here on the Coffee County. Each one of you tell a story about having to overcome some sort of diversity in some of the stories that you have. In looking back over the past 50 years and looking forward to the next 50 years, what can we look at? Where do we need to be focused at? What can we do better to stay in a state?
Anybody that's ready? George?
The question is as everybody's talked about the adversity they faced, and here's a young man who's at his first GEDA meeting and says, what can we look forward to for the next 50 years? I'm not a believer in shortcuts nor magic bullets. In my opinion, what has worked will work. You have a unified commitment. You do like Glenn said, you share with your community that what you're doing is important. At the state level, we got to invest. I mean, you cut it any way you want to. We got to have marketing funds. We got to have enough people, enough good people, maintaining and keeping enough good people. And then there's this whole subject of incentives, which I detest, absolutely detest. It was a factor in me leaving the department. I went. I left the.
I didn't know that, George.
I left.
He's had a few governors on that side too.
I left the department for that was one of the reasons, because I saw what was coming, and we've got to come to our senses on that. I mean, that is. I went to work for Cousins Properties after I left the department, and we were working on GE bringing their energy division. And I'd been gone about a year, and after I'd ranted and ranted and ranted about this incentive stuff, and the guys we were working with to get them to sign a big office lease for Cousins Properties said, "Now, we want this, 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 and this from the state." And I was put in the position of going down there and meet with Randy Cardoza. And he had the good manners not to laugh in my face, but I knew what he was thinking. But we got to play the game. You got to play the game. And what your community has done, one of the shining lights of this entire state, by the way, what your community has done, you've got to just do better. And I don't think there's any new thing or any magic thing or any, no brilliant idea is going to come out of heaven to help you.
Just add quickly to that, and remember, I'm ancient history. I came in under the 48-star flag. saw 49, added in 50. So 3 different flags, and y'all all touched on it in Glenn. To me, the key for the future is the human element. I mentioned Nelson Shipp. I was thinking about it the other night. He was there long before I got there. He's a man who suggested the Veterans Memorial Park at Cordele. And I realized well after the fact that I had not come anywhere close to using the talents that he had, though he was very effective at what he did in the department. I just think in all of us individually, we got a little extra power, a little extra steam we can use, and I think anything that we can do to draw out the full talents of those we work with and those we know. Everybody's got some hidden talents and some talents that are not used. So I think just developing that human spark that you already have and keep it going. And I'm glad you mentioned about the industrial developers into the Economic Development Association, because Chris, when you said, is anybody here was with that first group, you didn't ask if anybody was here before that first group. And I saw Ellen Stevenson later, who came along pretty quick after that. But I just want to say I'm proud to have been here for the 50th anniversary celebration of this great group, and I know there's 50 more good years to come.
Very good. Other questions?
Add one thing.
Add one.
There's no company, no prospect you'll ever have can locate anywhere without a good site. I don't care if it's a high-rise building in downtown Atlanta, it's a site. Or if it's a good, we can never stop ensuring that communities and big, small, and everything in between have good, viable sites for companies to build or locate in. And we forget that sometimes. So.
Who else has a question or a thought? Anybody?
Charlie, I would add one comment on incentives.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the word incentives has a negative connotation. I think we're doing a better job, a pretty good job, of putting in the context of return on investment. To help the legislators and the governor's office and others who are helping to make the decision on what we do for companies, if you can show that you're investing $1 million and you're going to get $10 million back in 3 years, that's a pretty good business decision. And that's the context we need to put this incentive issue in. Over the years, the word incentive's just gotten a bad rap. And George is right. We're either in it or we aren't. We're competitive or we aren't. But if you can make a case that this investment of X dollars returns you 10X, then it's a pretty good business decision. It gives support for the governor or whomever is making the decision to go ahead and do it.
Hey, Charlie, very
Sir.
from the subject, but I mentioned quickly, if you'll rent a copy of the movie I'd Climb the Highest Mountain, starring Susan Haywood and based on Cora Harris from Carsville's book on the circuit rider's wife, you'll see Glenn in there as a young man in that movie.
That's good to know. I didn't know that.
I did not know that. 10 years old at the time.
By the way, Randy, one thing about, we could tell a million stories about budgets, right? And going over to the Capitol and testifying. Very few of them any good. And but one of them, I remember a conversation where we had 6 cell phones, okay, in a pool that we checked out, like you mentioned. And so we went over one time and we said, you know, we want to, I forget how much they cost back then. We needed that much money in a line item in the budget. Well, is anybody in here from OPB? No. We went over and the OPB people said, we are not going to spend any money buying cell phones because this is just a fad. and all you can do is lease them. So we had to lease the first cell phones that we ever had because we finally convinced them otherwise. So that always sticks in my mind. Joanne.
I know we're fixing to leave, and this is kind of a humorous question, but I have to ask Glenn. The relocation of the office to the current location, did it have anything to do with George's comment? Because now you can look out the window and see the Geda. I just had to bring that up. I can't get it off my mind.
We had to present a aerial photograph, and we had the cheetah blocked out.
Where is the cheetah? I don't Okay, who else?
Charlie, yeah.
Melinda. The regional program.
We love our regional representatives. They've
Who
been
wants to-
an incredible
Randy,
help
you
over
wanna-
the last, 20 years or more that I've been in this business.
The regional
What was
program.
the start of the regional program?
Yeah, get
Randy.
more, Randy.
I wish you hadn't done that. No. Actually, the regional program, Gretchen's back there saying yay. The regional program was born in the General Assembly for the wrong reasons. The wrong reason being they wanted to have their own project manager with access to our database in Atlanta so they could find out what we were doing and go after it. Now, I'm just being bluntly honest with all of it. And as a result, they invited me over one day to have a conversation and said, if you will hire somebody, we'll give you the money. And it was pretty obvious that if I didn't hire somebody, we might not have any budget. So we did. We had 2 or 3 to begin with, and then it grew. And it's turned out to be a very, very good program. But that's the truth about how it got started. Now you know.
Who were the first regional project managers? Any of them in here? I know they are. Deborah Lonis was, and who else? Matt Trice is here somewhere. And who was the other one?
Is Deborah here?
Tom Croto was one of the first 3. Okay, good. Anybody else got comments? He's giving me the cut sign, right? Okay. So, thank you so much for being here and paying attention. Give them a big hand.